Welcome back. It is chapter 3. We're going to answer the question, how effectively does Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms protect your individual right? We are finally talking about the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. One of the most actually iconic symbols of Canada, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Like Tim Hortons, as Canadian as it is, good thing I have comments disabled because I know what you guys are going to say about Tim Hortons and it being Canadian. But this lesson, lesson 3.1, is all about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are going to learn the background information that was leading to the creation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So stick around and let's learn something. All right, like I mentioned, it's a new chapter. It is chapter 3, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So many people immigrate to Canada, rather, for this reason, for this document, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We exercise our rights and our freedoms on a regular basis. This is what this chapter is all about. The overall question that we are going to answer and take a look at is, how effectively does Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms protect your individual rights? The focus questions, lesson 3.2, will be, how does the Charter protect individual rights and freedoms? 3.3, how does the Charter affect lawmaking in Canada? And 3.4, how does the Charter affect the workplace? We have a whopping 4 words for our vocabulary: constitution, internment, labor union, and historical context. We're going to have an opening conversation here. I want you to follow along as I read this cartoon called Crossing the Line. As I'm reading, make a list or keep a list of all of your ideas, your thoughts, and your feelings as I'm going through this. And the question that you are going to take a look at the end of this cartoon, it's on the next slide as well: to what extent should individual rights and freedoms be protected in society? And you will pick which speaker you agree with the most, and you will tell me why. So this is Crossing the Line. This is based on a true story of what happened in a school here in Canada. All students, please remain in your classrooms while police complete a routine search of the school. What have you found, boy? Oh my, you're under arrest. The student was charged in court. He challenged the charge because of his rights under Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Clause B, states, everyone has the right to be secure from unreasonable search or seizure. 2 years later, charges against the student at St. Patrick's High School were thrown out of court today. The judge ruled that based on Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the police had conducted an unreasonable search of the student's locker. This reporter asked other students what they thought of this development. We have rights so that people in authority, like the police or the government, can't do unfair things. The police can't use dogs to sniff and search school lockers at random. They have to have a reason first. Our rights protect us. Without them, we'd have a police state. The police need to catch people who have drugs or weapons at school. If they use dogs to sniff out lockers and then search the lockers, it's fine by me. I really don't care about the rights of people who get caught this way. I just want my school to be safe. All right. To what extent should individual rights and freedoms be protected in society? You can use this cartoon as an example. And which speaker do you tend to agree with most? And we're going to talk about locker searches later on in the chapter. If you know from chapter 1, we have the Supreme Court of Canada, and they actually ruled saying that locker searches are legal in Canada, and you don't need a reasonable search warrant for a locker search to take place. But more on that a little bit later. So you can pause the video right now and you can take a look and kind of think to yourself, which speaker do you agree with most and why? All right, let's take a look at why Why, oh, why was the charter created? Well, to figure out why the charter was created, we actually need to go back in time. We're going to get into that time machine. Bloop! We're going to go back to the 1960s and the 1970s, where we had some major political issues taking place here in Canada. On the East Coast, we had Quebec. They were discontent. They had issues with language and social policies. Then over here in the West, we had provinces in the West. There was concern over the natural resources that was here in the West, and all of this, there was these constant issues hanging around over Canadians' heads. And in May of 1980, it seemed apparent that we needed to make some sort of change. There was some change that needed to be happened if Canada is going to be moving forward. Then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, you should recognize his name. His son later becomes Prime Minister of Canada as well. He starts and he goes on this campaign to have some sort of constitutional change. The Premier of Quebec at the time promised a referendum on Quebec sovereignty. Quebec wanted to become its own country with some economic ties to Canada, yes, but they wanted to become a sovereign state. This would have been disastrous for Canada. Economically, socially, this would not have been good. So to try to keep Quebec within Confederation, the Prime Minister at the time, Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, assures Quebec that its rights are going to be protected as soon as we get a new constitutional agreement. Long story short, Quebec goes to this referendum, and 58% of the people say no, they don't want to separate, and 42% say yes. The Premier of the time says, okay, you know what, we are going to keep this fight alive, and they do this in the 1990s, where the vote is much closer, 51 to 49, and we know that Quebec is still part of our country today. So this happened here in May of 1980. In October of 1980, the Prime Minister goes to the British government wanting to amend the BNA Act, the British North America Act, and wants to include the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But he does not have full support. If you remember back from Chapter 1, there is an amending formula, the 70-50 rule. You need 7 of the 10 provinces to agree, and at least 50% of the population to agree to change the Constitution. So you need 7 of the provinces, and one of them has to be one of the big ones, Ontario or Quebec, for this to happen. Well, eventually he goes and he gets 9 provinces on board and 50% of the population, but Quebec is still not happy and they hold out. However, nonetheless, regardless of what Quebec was feeling at the time, this amendment gets pushed through. It gets signed off by Queen Elizabeth II in April of 1982. And we now have a constitution that is officially our own. This bringing home of the Constitution from Britain is called patriation, and this is a huge deal in Canadian history. I always tell students there are 2 dates that you need to remember: 1867. I'm not going to tell you what that one is. You should know what that one is. And this one, 1982, where we've patriated our Constitution and we get our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right, I want you to head over to your notebooks and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.